All right, good morning, everybody. It is Jay again, and it is August here in Phoenix, Arizona. And today we're going to be talking about actually one of my favorite trees, one of the most bulletproof trees, one of the strongest trees, one of the easiest to grow trees here in the valley. And going off of most of the information, or let's just call it all the information here in the valley, really, it's not known that these grow here or that these can grow here so well in particular. All right, so a lot of the videos that I do are actually like just fighting a lot of the misinformation that's given here in town. And really, guys, it boils down to you have to actually trial and error this stuff and put in a really good effort to see if things are going to grow. So this is actually one of those trees that nobody really talks about here in the valley. In fact, most people will tell you that pear trees don't even work here in the valley. And actually, I sell quite a few pear trees. In fact, I sell a lot of pear trees because they do work so well here. And not only am I telling you they work here, but I do show you guys that they do in fact work here. Now, it is August, like I said, so you see the pears that I have in my hand. These are off of the trees here, which I will go over in just a moment with you. And you can see that these have already hit a pretty good size. You got to remember that this is a fall fruit. This is actually fills in one of your fall fruits, whereas there aren't that many of those. You know, you've got pomegranates, you've got some tropicals, but there's not a whole lot in the realm of the fall fruits. So you definitely want to plug one of these into your system or two or three, because then you will achieve that very hard to get fall fruit when it comes time to get fruit off of these trees, because these do ripen usually just before they start to lose their leaves. So you really often end up with a tree that is leafless and it's just got its pears hanging on as the last thing that you do end up eating. Now, I pull these off of the tree so that you guys can get scale or size, you know, so you guys can, let me set one of these down. You can see that these have already become a nice, good sized pear. In fact, that's as big or as bigger than most apples that you see here. So if we're already getting this size pear and it's only August, well, they've got a few more months of their growing season left, actually. And so these do end up becoming at least as large as the ones in the store. And in fact, mine get actually a lot larger than the ones that are in the store. So really what it boils down to is knowledge, guys. You got to have the information on whether or not certain plants will grow here. Then you have to have people that are going to trial and error these and actually show you that these work. And you got to remember, at my nursery in particular, if it doesn't grow here, I'm not going to sell it. So all the trees that I have for sale, and I have said this before, all the trees that I have for sale, I also have at least one or two of these trees in the ground to show you that they do in fact work here and they do have fruit on them. So of course I do have a few of these planted. I use pears, like I said, as a bulletproof tree. There are so many qualities about this tree, and I'm going to go over as many of those as I can think about so that you guys are well informed when you're buying pear trees. Okay, so what is this one I have in my hand? This is a beautiful variety that we grow here. This is called a kefir. I will show you the tag right here. This is a kefir pear, and I'm telling you, this is only one of about 10 pear trees that work really, really well here and produce fruit. So if you're wanting a variety, well, there's definitely a large variety of pear trees that are available. Well, here anyway. I don't know about the rest of the valley, although you will start to see other nurseries start to carry pears, usually after I do these videos and kind of inform everybody that these things do in fact work here. Okay, so pear trees, let's go over these. So pear trees are a tier 1 fruit tree. So what is a tier 1 fruit tree? I need to do a separate video on just that. So a tier 1 fruit tree are your bulletproof trees. They're your strongest trees. Tier 1, there's a list of 10 trees that are extremely tough here for the valley. And pear trees are on there. In fact, they're really high up on there because I use these as a shade tree to save other plants in a food forest. These plants will take full sun. In fact, a pear tree is very sensitive about being put in the shade. Now you see it's in a little bit of the shade right now, right? Because these are the nursery trees and the sun is stuck past the trees as of right this moment. So as it moves across, you can see the way that this is divided. I've got shade over some of these plants, but if you try to shade pear trees, well, they will die. They get fungal issues if they are put into the shade, and people don't put them into the sun because they think they're going to burn the tree up, right? So that's what ends up happening, is the health starts to fail on these trees. These are a full sun plant, guys. You have to put these in the full sun. And you can also see by their shape and their behavior that they are appropriate to do that with. So what do these look like? What's the size and structure look like? Well, almost all pear trees are going to grow nice and narrow and upright. So you can see here, as it sits here in a pot, you can see that all these branches go nice and tall. And you have to remember too that this is only a few months worth of growth on these. So these pear trees, they were cut by me. Let's find the cut. Really low. There's the cut right there. So in December, January, when these were bare roots, these were basically just a stump, right? You can see it here. Here's the pot, 15-gallon pot. You've got your root stock here. You've got your little bit of a stick that I leave on there. And then you have to remember that all of this new growth as of right here is brand new of this year. So the whole tree grows back again, basically, right? So this is just a few months worth of growth on a potted tree. And so imagine what this would be like if this was in the ground. So these grow easily 6, 8, 10, 12 feet a year. So if you're wanting to create a really fast microclimate, these are the way to go. Not only that, but they've got that nice upright shape. So you can fit them in amongst other trees, especially if you're trying to shade an area, right? So anytime you've got a tall, fast-growing tree like this, fruit tree or shade tree, you have to remember that this is going to provide a microclimate fast because it's going to cast a very long shadow as this tree grows taller, right? Because you have to remember that most trees, especially here in Arizona, are going to grow a little bit wider. They're going to have more of a wider, bushy shape, whereas the pears almost always are going to just go straight up to the sky, as you can kind of see over here on these guys here. So let me pause it just a moment here. Okay, so now real quick, we're going to look at one that I just planted this year in the yard. And guys, trust me, I don't plant things in the yard if, one, I don't think they're going to work, if I don't think they're going to fruit, or if they have no purpose at all whatsoever. Okay, so I have a really hot spot that is behind this area here, and it kind of blows back into the tropical area back here towards the back. And I really wanted to cool this area because it gets just heat blasted from there back in the afternoon. So I put this one right here to actually take the brunt of it. It's gonna be, he's not sacrificial, but he's gonna be my barrier there. So you can see he kind of grows up. This one has a little bit of a taller trunk to it. It starts right about here at about my hip, and then it grows up like this. And it was about here when I planted it. Now, per the potted trees that you see over there, I do plant my own potted trees. So it was one of those. So it was about here as far as height goes. And so just this year, just by putting it over here in the ground, it has grown up. And it's already up to there. So you guys can see the top, or the height of it there. So now we're looking at 10 plus feet already, and I just put this tree in. So this tree is definitely going to cover this whole back area and fill this in for shade. and fruit, like I said. Now you'll notice there's no fruit on this one here. And that is because when you plant a tree, especially a potted tree, and it has fruit on it, the best practice really is to take that fruit off when you plant the tree. No matter how big it is, no matter how small it is, no matter how much fruit it has on it, lots of fruit, a little bit of fruit, it doesn't really matter. You want to take off the fruit when you plant your tree. So this pear had plenty of pears on it already when I planted it, but I pulled all those off to give it some of that extra growth. If you leave the fruit on them, what will happen is it's going to slow the tree down, especially those first few initial years, right? So it really does help to take the fruit off of the trees. And I will show you a good example of that, because I like to educate and I like to teach and I like to show you guys what happens, right? So I basically put every tree through every type of environment that it could be possibly put through. So here is one here, and it is taking the brunt of the afternoon sun, right? So extremely tough tree. Now I'm going to show you another little example of one that I planted over here to let's really solidify the strength of these pear trees by proving it, because really you kind of have to prove everything in this industry. So this is another pear tree. Okay, and you can see him. He grows up here like this. Up like this. Now you may notice that this one doesn't quite look as good, right? Well, there's reasons for that, and I'm going to tell you those reasons now so that you know what to look for when you're doing yours, right? So, first off, this is the hottest spot in the yard, is this little particular area. It has no coverage at all in the afternoon. That just kind of comes in here and blasts this. You also have to remember that this is a metal wall behind this. So this isn't just a hot brick wall. This is actually a metal wall. So you can imagine how much heat that this wall is putting off back here in this area, right? The other reason why this one doesn't quite look as good, and this is good information for you guys, right? You can see that this one's a little bit droopier, is because I just this morning went through and picked off, I don't know, somewhere in the area of 30 pears off of this tree, right? I went ahead and thinned all of the rest of the fruit off of this tree. And you can see on the ground here, there's probably at least, I don't know, at least 30 pears, right? So your tree, if you leave too much fruit on them, especially when you plant a younger tree or a non-established tree, people have a tendency to let that thing fruit, right? Wow, look at all those. To let the tree fruit. Well, when you plant a new tree or a potted tree and it wants to put on this amount of fruit, you can't leave it, guys, because you have to remember the tree is trying to do two things at once. It's trying to grow, it's trying to root in, you know, and then it also has this huge fruit load on it. So it's multiple things that usually kill a tree, right? It's usually not just one thing. So if you know the behavior or know what to look for, then you know, oh my gosh, if something's struggling a little bit, there's things that you can do to help them out. Now, I purposely did this. Like, I did this to show you guys the video and to show you guys the difference on what happens when you leave a tree fully fruited. They don't grow much, right, guys? Because you have to remember they're dumping all that energy into the fruit. So you have to pick your poison. And really the best way to approach this is to let all of your fruit trees grow a lot bigger and then let them start putting on fruit. Because you can see at that size of a tree with this much fruit on it, it's taxing the tree. And the tree, while yes, is still alive and still growing, is not going to be as happy as one that you took the fruit off earlier in the year, right? It has nothing really to do with the location in this particular case. It has to do with the fruit load that this tree recently had on it. Now, what is going to happen? So what is going to happen now is, because I just pulled all the fruit off of this one to give him a much better start, and I know that's going to kill you guys, but you have to take it all off or nothing. You can't leave any on it. If you leave any on it, you might as well leave them all on it, because the tree is going to see it as the same. So here's what will happen exactly is this tree now will start to push on a whole bunch of new growth. It actually has a bunch up here at the top already, but it's going to start pushing a lot more out of all these other places, because the energy has now been taken from the fruit and put into the growth of the tree. So I know this seems like a small point, guys, but this is make it or break it. This is whether a fruit tree is going to live here or not can come down to the amount of fruit that it has on it when it is a smaller, younger tree, right? So now what's going to happen is, now that I've made the video, I can get the information. Well, now I can do this tree correctly, right? I've been doing him dirty. So now I can let him grow, fill in this area like where I wanted him to be, and then let him put on this fruit set later on down the road, because they're going to be a lot bigger and better anyway, even though a lot of these are already becoming a pretty good size. Pretty good size pear, right? But this was a really good time to get this video in here, because the misinformation about pears is incredible. Like, holy moly. I don't know what happened to the poor pears, but they are extremely, extremely hardy. All right, so we'll get back over here to these potted trees, and I'm going to give you guys a little bit more information on them. So really it comes down to several different things, right? Variety being a little bit important, not so much, but if you'll stick with the lower chill pears, like the ones that I carry at about 300 hours and under, you should be good. You're not going to be able to do all the pears here, guys. You're not going to be able to do high chill pears, but these low chill pears, oh my gosh, they look incredible out here. In fact, if you look these over, they're a perfect tree, right? You're not going to see any fertilizer burns, any salt burns, any chloroticness. The edge is perfect. There's no burning at all whatsoever, or the tips, guys. And you know how Arizona is here on plants. And you got to remember that I don't have filters on these on the water. I grow everything just like you guys would. But if you examine every one of these trees, they look absolutely perfect out here. Now they're starting to get some sun. They look absolutely perfect. So fruit, you know, do they fruit? Like, absolutely they fruit. I showed you a few just a second ago. I can come over here to this Asian pear, because this Asian pear is, oh my gosh, this thing is loaded. You want to talk about loaded. So let me show you guys here, right? This is a potted tree. You have to keep that in mind. Potted Asian pear tree in full sun, and it has this amount of fruit on it. Can you imagine if if I thin them, the fruit's going to get bigger, right? But imagine this tree in the ground and how much that it would produce. So 3 nice ones there, 1 there. We got a branch almost breaking over here. And these are not small, guys. These are not golf ball sized, and they end up being actually quite a bit bigger than this. But this thing is just loaded. 1 there, 3 huge ones here. I mean, absolutely beautiful. You're starting to get their classic little brown on them. I don't know if you guys can see that, but they start out sort of a yellow, and then they get this sort of russeted brown on the Asian pears. See, that ain't small. And you got to remember, these are not full grown yet. These have a while, many more months to go. Look at these guys. Beautiful. A bagged one here so you guys can see what the food saver bags look like. Got more on this branch. Same pear tree. And then I noticed this morning I almost got smacked by these ones overhead, but I got a couple nice ones growing up here at the top too. So yeah, they're not small. These aren't small, guys. These are going to be official official Asian pears when they're done growing. So yeah, we don't have a very big pear tree here because, like I said, it's in a pot, and look how many fruit are on that thing. And those of you that know, obviously, fruit trees don't fruit as well in pots. And so imagine what your results would be when you plant these in the ground, right? So pear trees, pear trees, pear trees. Let's go over to another one here. Different kind. Let's see if we can see them here. Look at these big, beautiful pears. So I've left it on some of the older trees so that you guys can see the fruit and see that they do actually fruit here. Let me get a shot underneath here. So yeah, guys, pears. Pears, pears, pears. Pears work really good. And like I said, I have them as my front line of defense, actually. In fact, they are protecting a lot of other trees that don't necessarily even need protection, right? Like some citrus. There's some citrus back there, mainly, and it's keeping them nice and cool. But guys, look how beautiful these look in the middle of August when everything else is burnt up. No, you don't have that on these. You have, they're just killing it out here. All brand new growth. They just love the sun. So you can't get a better tree than this. And actually, I'll go over, this will be one of the tiers, like I said, in the tier system of trees. And this is ranked pretty high up there. I think when I was doing the list, this was number 4. You know, with being above it, you know, olives, pomegranates, mulberries, and then you jump right into pear trees, which is just not known or not known about, right? So I've been growing these for several years. I've been trialing and erroring them, seeing which one works the best, which ones fruit the best, which ones grow the best, which ones burn up, which ones have the best flavor, which ones are going to do best in a pot, which ones are going to do best in the ground. Are they productive? Is it a fall fruit? I mean, they check all of these boxes basically as one of the basic perfect trees for Arizona. And I'll tell you another awesome benefit with these is you don't have to wrap the trunks on these. This is really one of the only trees that I do not wrap or trunk wrap the trunk, right? Because they're so tough. So not only are they out here on this front line, but none of the pear trees have their trunks wrapped because they just don't need it. This has the strongest bark that I think I've ever seen on a fruit tree. It's just very hard to burn them up and very hard to kill a pear tree, which is basically against everything we've been told or heard or counterintuitive to the valley, because why would we grow pears, okay? So what is the main detriment, or what has demonized this tree here? Well, what's demonized this tree here is people think that these are very susceptible to fire blight, okay? Well, what is fire blight? Fire blight is a fungus that attacks the pear trees, apple trees, those type of plants. And what it does is it creates a fungal issue up here at the top, and you end up getting all this black, burnt tops of the trees. It basically looks like your tree has been set on fire. I guess that's a better way to think about it. And really you start to kind of see that, if you saw that on trees, is you're going to see that mainly on the tips of these and on the new growth especially, right? So I think a lot of the fire blight issue is people think a pear tree needs to be in the shade, so they put it in the shade, and it does not have a good immune system in the sun. Guys, remember, it's a full sun tree. It's not going to have a good immune system in order to fight anything like that. So if it ever got fire blight on most people's pears, if they stuck them in the shade, well, then it may take out the tree because they can't fight that, right? Now, I'll tell you what my experience has been, or what I see, and I think a lot of people are attributing to fire blight, and it's not. In some cases, maybe it is, but I'll tell you really what I observe or what I've seen and where people attribute to fire blight, and that is this, okay? So inevitably, when these are during their growth season, especially in the spring, okay, it is going to be windy. It is going to be really windy those days. And the wind will actually burn and dry out the tips of the trees, okay? So what ends up happening is they're getting a lot of this black and burnt, but if you'll notice, what they're saying is fire blight. Like I said, sometimes it may be, but not in my experience. It's been wind. So you get all this wind burning on the new growth, and what that ends up happening is that sort of mimics what they look like if they have fire blight. Because when when pear trees get burnt or get sunburnt, because yes, you can burn the top of this, especially this new growth, right? This will turn sort of black and look exactly like it got hit by fire blight. So I see that happening only one time a year, and that's in the very early spring when the winds begin. And if you don't think wind affects plants and trees, look at citrus, okay, guys? And you know this for a fact by growing citrus here. Every single time we get the blooms in the spring, inevitably it's going to be windy, and it's going to knock off all those little blooms and blossoms, and you end up with half the fruit because it dries the trees out, just like it dries the pear trees out, right? So to kind of summarize this, guys, wrap this all up, I know it's been a little bit longer video than I wanted, 30 minutes on pear trees, but you also have to remember there's more information there than just about that specific tree that I'm talking about, right? So basically, yeah, very, very, very tough tree. Tier 1 tree. Number 4 on the list, number 4 or 5, I can't remember. I need to do the video on the tier tree systems. And very, very hardy tree. I wouldn't plant them if I didn't think that they would work or fruit, right? So, like I said, I don't sell anything I don't plant or put my heart or knowledge or experience into. And from my experience with pear trees is these things are killer. Killer in the valley. They work so good, and they fruit like I've showed you just now, right? I had to wait a little bit to do this video for some of these varieties to get a little older so I could show you the fruit on them, right? So, strong tree, doesn't require very much water when it's established. It's going to be tall, narrow, and upright, which will fill a void in your yard where you need some tall, skinny shade. As you guys start to get food forests, you start to run out of spots. Well, this is one that you can pack in very, very, very close to other trees. Not to mention, they're pears, and I love pears, but I like homegrown pears. I don't like the store-bought pears because the store-bought pears are so hard, and I like mine to be a little bit softer and not quite so crunchy. Not to mention, I love Asian pears. I mean, Asian pears are a completely different animal. Even though they are a pear, they actually taste a lot more like a super delicious, watery, crunchy apple than they actually do a pear, right? So, yeah, you can pick your poison. Just make sure you get the correct varieties. There are some that work here better than others. If you're looking for the traditional Bartlett pear, guys, I'm going to sorely let you down. That's not a very good one here for the valley, although the tree will grow just fine. You're just never going to really get good fruit set off of them because it's too high chill hour of a pear tree. So you guys might have to pick some different pears, but believe me, the varieties are out there. And if you want a fall fruit, well, then here it is. So I don't know that I can explain this better, guys, on this being probably one of the most wonderful trees that you could plant here in the valley, other than it's been demonized by a lot of people, and it's one being the fire blight issue, which I think, if anything, they're only seeing it like 10% of the time, and they think they're seeing it all the time, and that is because of the additional wind that we get. I just have observed that that's what happens during that time period, right? The other thing that's been demonized is just nobody's tried. Like, nobody's ever really tried. They say they do. You know, I'm trying for years and years and years and never got pears to work, but we got them to work pretty easily. This was within a 3-year program, because obviously we've got them fruiting here at this size. So they do work here, guys. So from my experiences, only take in half of what you hear, right? Take in half of what you hear, even on this video. Take all the information from it and then trial it on your own, because if you listen to everybody else in the valley, even nurseries or people that have been established for a while, I mean, they'll run you full of bullshit too, guys. I'm sorry to put it that way, pardon my French, but it's just misinformation, guys. And I'll tell you, there's nothing that bothers me more than misinformation. When people tell you things like pears don't work here, and you're looking right outside your door and there's pears, or people tell you that mangoes don't work here and you look right outside your door and there's mango trees and they've been there for years, okay? So bottom line, guys, try a bunch of stuff on your own. Don't be afraid to be experimental, but also look at those people that have done and put the work into these plants, because there's certain of us, you got to remember, that are obsessed with this, okay? It's not just hey, I want a couple little fruit trees in my backyard to look cool kind of guy, right? No, I eat out of here, guys. So if things don't produce, then I'm not eating. So it is very critical for the plants to produce well here. And I wouldn't trump this tree so highly if I didn't think that it was a wonderful tree here for the valley, guys. So if you have not added pears, and I know a lot of you have added pears this last year, because I've had them here and I've had them fruiting. So I know a lot of you have added pears this year. If you haven't, maybe consider adding one of these, and also come check out some of the pear trees here and the varieties, because they're not all built equal, meaning not all of your Asian pear trees are going to produce as well as some of the varieties that are around here, because like I said, I've tried them all, right? All right, guys, that is it for this video. It's long-winded, I realize that, but you also have to remember that there's always more information in the video than about the particular fruit tree that I'm talking about at the time. It's to arm you with information, guys. So please hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and keep posting questions and comments, because that's the fuel to the fire that gets me out here to plant these trees. And it's usually a lot of misinformation. It usually gets me worked up enough to where I got to get out here and make a video, because holy moly, I'm just sick of all the misinformation here in the valley, even by people that are so-called experts that have lived here for years and years and years and years and tried things. Well, obviously they either haven't tried hard enough, or haven't tried the right varieties, or maybe just didn't even care about pear trees, so why would we even bother? All right, guys, that is it. Long-winded explanation on pear trees. Get out and get yourself one. Have a good afternoon.